They say curiosity killed the cat, but it doesn't stop there. For Elias, curiosity was a hunger that could not be denied. After hearing the whispers, after feeling the eyes that weren't there, he stood in the middle of his apartment, the air thick and suffocating. His pulse thundering, his chest tight, he knew something was waiting for him. Something that shouldn't exist. If you are listening alone, if the darkness is creeping closer around you, now is the moment to be careful. And yet, you are here. And if you want to witness what comes next, subscribe now, before the abyss finds you. The descent began not with violence, but with subtle shifts in the world around him. The hallway stretched, impossibly long, each step echoing louder than it should. Shadows pooled into corners that had never existed before. The walls seemed to breathe, slow, laborious, as if the building itself were alive and aware of his presence. The whispers followed him, growing louder, almost coaxing him, yet threatening in a way words cannot fully capture. Elias's feet moved forward, guided by some unseen force. He felt drawn to a door at the end of the corridor, a door that had not been there yesterday. The air around it was colder, thicker, like inhaling a fog that clung to his lungs. The whispers were clearer now, forming syllables he could almost understand, words that sounded like his name, and worse, words that sounded like his fears, spoken aloud before he even knew them. With every step, reality twisted further. The hallway walls shimmered, and at times, for just a heartbeat, they disappeared completely, revealing a darkness deeper than night. He caught glimpses of movement, shadowy figures slinking at the edges of perception, humanoid but wrong, too long in limb, too empty in face. And yet, he could never bring himself to turn away. Fear and fascination had become a single, unbroken chain around his mind. The descent deepened. Sounds distorted, the whispers overlapped, repeating, layering, like echoes in an abandoned cathedral. Doors that should have led nowhere now opened into rooms filled with fog so dense he could barely see his own hands. Shapes flickered inside, shapes that looked human, and yet, not. Their eyes glimmered faintly, and they paused just beyond the veil, watching him, waiting. Elias realized then, with the sick weight of understanding, that he was no longer simply walking through his apartment. He was moving through something else. Something ancient. Something patient. The building itself had become a vessel for the abyss, stretching, bending, and guiding him deeper into its heart. And as the fog thickened and the whispers became a chant, he paused, his mind screaming at him to stop. But the abyss does not tolerate hesitation. It waited. And so he moved forward, and the descent consumed him, step by step, heartbeat by heartbeat, breath by breath. And now, listener, if you are still with me, hear this: the abyss has a way of finding those who are drawn to it. Those who watch, those who listen, those who click. If you wish to survive the next descent, to understand the stories hidden within the shadows, subscribe. Walk with me further into the abyss, if you dare. Because once you descend, once the shadows take hold, there is no turning back. Before the darkness claimed him, before the whispers began to echo through empty hallways, Elias was just a man like any other. A man who walked the streets of the city without notice, who returned to his small apartment each night, and who lived his life quietly, carefully, almost invisibly. He wasn't reckless. He wasn't brave. He wasn't the kind of person you'd expect to stumble into something the world has chosen to hide. But curiosity is a dangerous companion, isn't it? It creeps into your thoughts, whispers in your ear, and draws you toward the things you are not meant to see. Elias had always been curious. Small curiosities, strange alleyways, abandoned buildings, rumors he shouldn't have listened to. He told himself it was harmless, just the hunger to understand the unknown. But as anyone who has wandered too far knows, the unknown does not forgive. You, listening now, perhaps you feel that same pull. Perhaps you are drawn to the darkness that calls, that whispers. If so, subscribe, and follow me further into the abyss, if you dare. But beware, once you begin, there is no turning back. Elias worked nights at a factory, surrounded by machines that clanked and hissed, the world outside his windows quiet and distant. His apartment was small, cluttered with books, notes, and trinkets, remnants of a life spent searching for meaning, for patterns in the world, for glimpses of something beyond ordinary perception. On this night, though, something waited. Something that had been patient, watching, and waiting for a mind like his to wander too close. He lived alone, but never truly felt alone. That sense would change. That night, for the first time, the feeling of being watched crept in. a shadow in the corner of the room, or maybe in the corner of his mind. A presence that didn't belong, that hovered on the edge of perception. He shook his head, telling himself it was fatigue, that the hum of the city outside his window was playing tricks on him. Yet, the sensation would not fade. Elias's hands trembled slightly as he brewed a cup of tea, the kettle whistling through the quiet apartment. He felt the first prickling of fear, a subtle tension under his skin that said, something is wrong. And he was right. Because the abyss does not announce itself. It waits. And tonight, it had chosen him. Elias had settled into the familiar rhythm of his night, telling himself the shadows were harmless. He sipped his tea, the warmth barely reaching the chill crawling along his spine. And then, he noticed it. A sound. Not loud, not demanding attention, just a subtle shift in the silence. At first, he ignored it. Perhaps the floorboards creaked. Perhaps a neighbor moved. Perhaps it was something else. He paused, listening. The sound returned, clearer this time, but still impossibly soft, almost beneath the threshold of hearing. A whisper, or perhaps a name, his name. Elias. He froze. Every rational thought in his mind screamed to ignore it. Every instinct screamed to leave the apartment, to run into the streets, to escape the suffocating dark. But curiosity, that old, dangerous friend, held him in place. Then came the first sign. Not something he could see, but something he could feel. A chill running across his shoulders, the kind that feels like fingertips brushing just out of reach. The lights flickered, briefly, as if the apartment itself were shivering. Shadows stretched and quivered on the walls, twisting into shapes that made no sense. A figure, fleeting, just at the corner of his vision. Human? Perhaps. But wrong. Something, not meant to exist in this world. And still, Elias was drawn forward. He moved toward the hallway, where the air grew heavier with every step. The whispers followed him, weaving into his thoughts, echoing doubts, fears, memories he had buried long ago. A sensation settled over him, a weight that pressed against his mind, bending reality in ways that were impossible to explain. Listener, if you are hearing this, if you feel the shadows creeping closer in your own room, now is the moment to pay attention. There are things in this world that do not forgive curiosity. If you wish to survive, subscribe, and stay with me. Follow the path, if you dare. Elias reached the end of the hallway, where the walls narrowed, and the darkness pooled like liquid. A mirror reflected his face back at him, pale and tense, but something was off. His eyes flickered with a memory that wasn't his, a shadow that moved independently behind him. He turned sharply, but nothing was there. And yet, he knew it had been. The first sign had revealed itself fully now. The apartment, the life he knew, was no longer a sanctuary. Something had entered. Something patient, waiting for a mind like his to falter. And as he realized it, the whispers grew louder, forming patterns that he could almost understand, secrets meant only for him, shaping his fear into anticipation, his dread into obsession. And so it began. The first real brush with the abyss. A subtle, insidious warning that nothing would ever be the same again. They say curiosity has a price. Elias would soon learn just how heavy that price could be. The first signs had only been a whisper, a fleeting shadow, harmless enough for some. But for Elias, it was the doorway opening to something far darker, something the world does not speak of. The hallway stretched before him as he stepped forward. Or perhaps it had always been longer. He could not be certain anymore. Shadows pooled unnaturally in the corners, thick and black, moving slightly when he wasn't looking. Each step made his heart pound, each breath felt like inhaling cold, stagnant air. If you are listening, alone, in the dark, know this, some things are drawn to attention. They wait. They watch. And if you want to survive the stories to come, subscribe now, and follow me into the abyss. But beware, curiosity opens doors you may never close. Elias felt the pull before he even realized it. Not a force he could see, but a sensation that tugged at the edges of his mind, guiding him down the hallway that warped and twisted before his eyes. The walls shimmered, not with light, but with shadows, bending in ways impossible in the waking world. The air grew heavier, each inhalation burning in his lungs. The whispers returned, louder now, clearer, weaving into his thoughts, repeating his name over and over, and then, worse. They began speaking of his fears, his secrets, the things he had buried in the corners of his mind. With every step, the floor beneath him seemed to pulse. The ceiling stretched higher, then lower, as if the building itself were breathing, alive, waiting. Something was there, just out of sight. Something patient, ancient, watching, feeding on the small, fragile tendrils of his curiosity. He rounded a corner, and the first real glimpse of it brushed the edge of his vision. A figure, tall, impossibly thin, limbs bending wrong, eyes glowing faintly in the darkness. Elias froze, his pulse hammering in his ears. It did not move like a human. It did not move like any creature he had ever known. It moved as the abyss itself moves, slow, deliberate, inevitable. The hallway seemed endless. Every door he passed led to rooms filled with thick fog and shadows that flickered just beyond understanding. Every mirror reflected not him, but something else. Something distorted, smiling where it shouldn't, whispering where it shouldn't. Listener, if you are still with me, know this: the abyss finds those who seek it. Those who stare too long into the darkness, those who are drawn to the forbidden, it finds you. Subscribe, and stay with me, and perhaps together we will survive the descent. Perhaps. Elias's legs moved of their own accord. Each step deeper into the darkness was heavier, as if unseen hands pressed against him, urging him forward, pulling him into places his mind could not comprehend. The whispers crescendoed into a chorus of voices, overlapping, repeating, forming patterns that should not exist, shapes that should not exist. He stumbled, nearly falling into a shadow that seemed to swallow light itself. And as he caught himself, he realized there was no turning back. The descent had begun. Not with screams, not with terror in the streets, but with quiet. Quiet that presses on your ears, that fills your chest with a cold, unrelenting pressure. Quiet that lingers after the lights come on, after the doors are locked. Quiet that follows you, that waits for you, always. And Elias understood something no one should: the abyss is patient. It waits for curiosity. It waits for hesitation. It waits for fear to bloom, and then, it moves. That night, he walked deeper into his own apartment and into a world that no one else could see. And as he did, the shadows leaned closer, the whispers sharpened, and the darkness waited. The descent had begun, but the worst was yet to come. Elias moved through the warped hallway, each step a struggle against the invisible weight pressing against him. The air was thick, heavy, almost liquid in its density. And then, he felt it. Not a shadow, not a figure, not a sound. Something that existed only in the spaces between sight and thought. A presence. Cold, patient, and unyielding. It was there in the corner of his vision, flickering, vanishing when he looked directly. It was in the silence between the whispers, in the stretch of hallway where light should have been. If you are listening alone, if the darkness presses closer around you, feel it. The abyss is patient. It watches. It waits. And if you want to understand, if you want to survive the stories to come, subscribe now, before it finds you. Elias froze, his pulse pounding in his ears. Every nerve in his body screamed that he was not alone. Yet he could see nothing. Just the empty hallway, flickering lights, and the faint pulse of fog drifting along the floor. And still, he felt it. Watching. Waiting. At first, it was subtle. A faint brush of cold across his shoulder, a whisper so soft he thought he imagined it. But soon, the signs became impossible to ignore. Footsteps echoed behind him, though when he spun around, the hallway was empty. Doors creaked open and closed, rooms appearing where none had been before. Mirrors reflected shapes that moved on their own, figures hovering behind his reflection that vanished when he turned. The presence didn't approach, it didn't need to. It made itself known by twisting the world around him, by bending perception until he could no longer trust his senses. He was trapped in the apartment he had lived in for years, and yet he felt like he had stepped into a place outside of reality entirely. A voice whispered again, low and guttural, more felt than heard, "Do not look, yet watch, do not move, yet follow." Every word pressed into his mind, shaping his fear, feeding it, twisting it into obsession. The presence was learning him. Learning his fears. Learning his weaknesses. Elias stumbled through the corridor, breath ragged, mind screaming to flee. But the hallway never ended. Every corner brought more darkness. Every door he passed led to another room full of impossibility, shadows coiling into shapes that should not exist. And all the while, the presence watched. Listener, do you feel it too? In the quiet, in the dark, in the spaces just beyond sight? That feeling that someone, or something, is waiting? That is the abyss. And it always waits for those who listen. Subscribe, and stay with me. Only those who follow the path will learn its secrets, though not all survive. Then, Elias saw it. A figure just out of reach, tall and thin, limbs bending at impossible angles. Eyes faintly glowing, hollow yet aware, staring straight through him. It didn't move like a predator, it moved like inevitability itself. He knew that if it wanted, it could be on him in an instant. But it didn't. It waited, patient, teaching fear in its own slow, torturous way. The unseen presence was no longer a thought or a feeling. It had become real. It had become immediate. And Elias understood the truth no one should ever know: the abyss does not need to strike to terrify. Its mere observation is enough to break the mind. And as the shadows thickened, as the whispers formed a chorus of voices he could not escape, Elias realized he was not the master of his own body or his own thoughts. The abyss had claimed the space between his senses. It had claimed his fear. And it would follow him, always. The whispers had become a chorus. The shadows had thickened, stretching impossibly long, curling in corners that should not exist. And then, Elias saw it. Not just a shadow. Not just a flicker at the edge of vision. This was something tangible. Something that should not be in this world. Something alive, yet not. It emerged slowly from the darkness, gliding with a patience that made the heart quake. Its form was humanoid, but wrong. Too thin, too long. Limbs bending in impossible ways. Joints cracking softly with each motion, yet moving fluidly, unnaturally. Its skin was pale, almost translucent, stretching taut across its frame, reflecting the flickering lights of the hallway like a corpse polished in shadows. The eyes. Oh, the eyes. They glowed faintly, not with life, not with warmth, but with a void. Hollow. Endless. Watching. Seeing. Knowing. Elias's breath caught in his throat. His hands shook as he tried to retreat, but his legs felt like they were sinking into the floor itself. If you are listening, if you are alone in the dark, feel it. That moment when you know something is real, and it is staring straight at you. That is the abyss. If you want to survive, subscribe, and follow me. Walk carefully, if you dare. The creature stepped closer, its movement slow, deliberate, as if testing the boundaries of reality itself. It did not speak. It did not need to. The air around it vibrated with anticipation, a silent pressure that filled the room, squeezing the lungs, making the skin crawl. Elias could feel it pressing on his thoughts, on his very perception of what was real. And then, a hand, long, thin, skeletal, reaching just far enough that it didn't touch him. But the sensation was electric. A chill that ran through every nerve, a shiver that rattled his mind. He felt his sanity teeter on the edge. The abyss had shown itself. And in that instant, Elias understood the truth he could never unlearn: it was patient. It was intelligent. It did not need to harm to terrify. The mere act of being observed, being studied, was enough to break a man. His heartbeat echoed in his ears as he forced himself backward, step by trembling step. And still, the figure did not advance, only hovered in the darkness, watching, waiting. Its glow pulsed faintly, as if breathing alongside him, synchronized with his terror. Listener, this is the point where the abyss does not ask. It does not warn. It waits for hesitation, for fear to bloom, and then, it moves. If you wish to survive the next story, if you wish to see what lies deeper, subscribe. Step closer, if you dare. But know this: once seen, it cannot be unseen. The first encounter ended not with a scream, not with a fight, but with understanding. Elias knew he had been touched by something far older, far colder, and far more patient than any human mind could comprehend. And as the lights flickered again, the shadows stretching back to normal, he realized, with a dread that settled deep in his chest, that he had been changed. Forever. The abyss had reached through the world, and it had found him. And it would not let go. The first encounter had passed, but nothing was the same. Elias's heart still thundered in his chest, his breath came in ragged gasps, and every shadow in the room now seemed alive. The figure was gone, and yet, it remained. Always, just out of sight, pressing against his mind, threading into his thoughts like a parasite. He tried to rationalize it. Perhaps fatigue, perhaps fear playing tricks. But when he looked at the walls, they stretched, bending unnaturally. Hallways that he had walked 100 times now seemed to fold in on themselves. Doors that should have led nowhere opened into impossible rooms, and mirrors reflected shapes that were wrong. Too long, too thin, too empty. And the eyes in those reflections followed him. Always. Listener, do you feel it? That creeping sense that reality is no longer yours, that the world you trust is unraveling? That is what happens when the abyss touches the mind. If you want to survive the horrors yet to come, subscribe. Step carefully, if you dare. Elias's own thoughts turned against him. Voices he hadn't heard since childhood whispered in corners of his mind. Names he didn't know echoed as if remembered. Memories warped, faces in his mind distorted. He questioned what was real and what was not. Even his own hands, his own feet, seemed alien at times, moving before he willed them, tremors he could not control. The apartment itself became a cage. The floors pulsed underfoot. The ceilings dropped impossibly low, then stretched into infinity. Shadows moved independently of light. The whispers that had been distant now filled every corner of his mind, overlapping, repeating, shaping his fear into obsession. Each shadow, each flicker, each soft sound, seemed deliberate, as if the abyss itself was teaching him how to fear. And yet, the figure had not returned fully. It did not need to. Its presence was in the suggestion, the distortion of reality. Elias realized that horror is not only what you see, it is what you believe, what you imagine, what your mind convinces you is real. And in that moment, he understood, the abyss does not strike, it waits. It instructs. It consumes from within. He stumbled through his apartment, mind fraying, walls pulsating, mirrors reflecting his terror back at him. Doors opened where none existed. Hallways led to corners that twisted impossibly. A shadowy figure flickered at the edge of perception, disappearing when he looked directly. The air was thick with whispers, every syllable pressing into his brain, reshaping thought into panic. Listener, hear this. When your mind begins to betray you, when shadows move where there should be none, when whispers echo truths you never told, that is when the abyss has claimed you. Subscribe now, and follow carefully, if you wish to witness more. But remember, sanity is fragile. Once it fractures, there is no return. Elias sank to the floor, clutching his head. He could not distinguish reality from hallucination. He felt himself unraveling, the boundaries of his mind stretching, tearing. And still, the whispering persisted, patient, cold, unrelenting. The abyss did not need to move. Its presence alone was enough to drive him to the edge. Hours, or perhaps minutes, passed. Time no longer existed. The line between fear and thought blurred. Every sound, every flicker of shadow, every reflection became a test of his sanity. And in the quiet between the whispers, a terrible realization dawned on him. He could never escape. The abyss was not outside. It had entered, and it would remain, forever. The whispers had grown into a roar. The shadows had thickened into writhing tendrils. Every corner of the apartment now seemed alive, pulsating with intent. And then, it came. The full weight of the abyss. Elias stumbled backward, heart hammering, lungs burning, his legs threatening to give way. The figure from before had fully revealed itself, or perhaps it had been there all along, waiting for this moment. Its limbs bent at impossible angles, each step silent yet heavier than any sound could be. Its hollow eyes, faintly glowing, pierced through him, reading every thought, every fear, every memory he had tried to hide from himself. Listener, if you are listening alone, know this, fear is not just in the world around you. It is in your mind, your thoughts, your blood. And some things are so ancient, so patient, that even the strongest hearts cannot withstand them. If you want to survive, subscribe, and follow me deeper into the abyss, if you dare. The air thickened, making every breath a struggle. Walls warped, folding in and out, as though the apartment itself were alive, trying to crush him. The shadows stretched across the floor and ceiling, crawling toward him with intent. The whispers had transformed into a chorus of voices, thousands of voices, overlapping, screaming, mocking, calling his name. Elias fell to his knees, clutching his head, trying to shut out the sound, but it penetrated every corner of his mind. And then the figure moved. Swiftly now, impossibly fast, gliding toward him with limbs that should not bend in the ways they did. Each step brought the abyss closer, pressing against him, filling the room, suffocating reality itself. He scrambled backward, crashing into walls, doors, mirrors, anything to put distance between himself and the impossible creature. And then, just as suddenly, the room fell silent. The figure hovered over him, unmoving, its hollow gaze burning into his soul. Time stretched infinitely. Elias could feel his heartbeat, slow and heavy. Breath shallow. Mind teetering on the edge of total collapse. It reached toward him, not to touch, but to claim. A skeletal hand extended, long, thin, impossibly precise. The pressure in the room was unbearable, like gravity had multiplied 100-fold, pressing him into the floor. He felt himself slipping away. Reality, memory, even thought began to fracture. And he realized with horror, if he fell now, he would not survive. Not physically, not mentally, not spiritually. And in that instant, Elias did something instinctive. He screamed, not just in sound, but in pure, desperate will. He forced his mind to focus, to anchor to something tangible, something real. The figure recoiled slightly, as if surprised by the resistance. And then, it paused. The pressure lifted, just a fraction. The whispers softened. The shadows receded slightly. Listener, hear this. That moment when the impossible touches you, when the abyss itself reaches into your reality, that is when courage is forged. Subscribe now, and follow carefully. There are more horrors waiting, and not all who watch will survive. Elias collapsed, gasping, trembling, heart pounding like a drum of doom. He had survived the first true encounter with the abyss. But the memory, the presence, the knowledge, would never leave him. It had claimed a part of him. A part he could never reclaim. And as he lay there, shivering, the faintest whisper tickled the edge of his consciousness. This is only the beginning. The climax had passed, but the abyss had not. It waited, patient, unyielding, eternal. And Elias had seen its face. He would never be the same again. The night had ended, or so Elias thought. The figure had vanished. The shadows had receded. The whispers had softened, fading into the quiet hum of the apartment. Yet, nothing felt normal. Nothing felt real. Listener, if you are in the dark now, alone, hear this: the abyss never truly leaves. You may see calm, you may feel safety, but it waits. Always. And if you want to continue surviving, subscribe, and follow me further into the abyss, if you dare. Elias sat on the cold floor, trembling, trying to make sense of what had happened. The fear that had gripped him, that had threatened to break his mind entirely, had not left. It lingered in his chest, in his limbs, in his very bones. Every creak of the floor, every flicker of light, every shadow in the corner of the room, felt like it could be watching him. Sleep would not come. Rest would not come. Even in daylight, the memories clung to him like a second skin. Shadows in broad daylight seemed darker, corners of rooms sharper. Mirrors reflected not only him but glimpses of that thing he had encountered. A presence that had learned him, touched him, claimed a piece of his very being. And the whispers never completely faded. Sometimes, in the hum of appliances, the rustle of leaves outside, the turning of a page, he heard them. Low, subtle, almost beneath hearing. Calling. Waiting. Patient. Eternal. Elias tried to return to his life. Tried to convince himself it had been imagination, fatigue, a trick of the mind. But he could not. He could never be the same. He had seen what should not be seen. He had felt what should not be felt. And in the quietest moments, when he thought he was alone, he felt it. Watching. Waiting. Always. Listener, do you feel the pull now? That creeping chill, that sense of being observed? That is the abyss. It waits for those who are curious, for those who listen, for those who dare. If you want to descend further, to uncover more of what lurks beyond the edges of reality, subscribe. Follow me deeper, if you dare. Because the truth is simple: some doors, some shadows, some whispers, once encountered, never leave. And Elias knows this better than anyone. He survived the first encounter. But he carries it with him. Always. And so will you, if you stay. The abyss is patient. The abyss is eternal. And it is always watching. Just when you think the night has ended, when you think the shadows have gone, the whispers begin. Listener, if you are brave enough, if you are still following, you are about to step into the second tale from the abyss. And this one listens to you. It watches you. It knows what you fear, and it feeds on it. Subscribe, now, if you dare, for the forgotten are patient, and the shadows do not forgive. The town was small, nearly invisible on the map, the kind of place people pass by without a thought. But there were places in the town that even the locals avoided. Buildings abandoned, streets that twisted unnaturally, alleys where fog gathered as if alive. And it was here that Marla, curious, restless, and obsessed with the forgotten stories of the world, found herself. She had heard whispers in the wind, rumors of a place abandoned for decades, a house left to rot, yet somehow, occupied. The locals would never speak its name. They would only shake their heads and avert their eyes. But curiosity, oh, curiosity has a cost. And Marla had always paid it willingly. As she approached the house, the air shifted. A chill ran through her spine, colder than any winter wind. The faintest whisper brushed against her mind. She paused. No one was around. No wind stirred. And yet, it called her. Listener, do you feel it too? That sensation that something unseen is watching you, lingering just beyond sight? That is what Marla feels. That is what the abyss offers to those who dare follow. Subscribe, if you wish to descend further, to hear what should not be heard. But beware, once you listen, the whispers do not leave. The front door of the house was ajar, creaking faintly as it swayed in the dead air. Shadows pooled in corners thicker than darkness itself. Marla hesitated, then stepped inside. Each footfall echoed unnaturally, bouncing off walls that seemed to stretch and twist in impossible ways. And then she heard it, a whisper, soft, almost gentle, yet undeniably human, "You shouldn't be here." But Marla could not turn back. She could not escape the pull of curiosity. And as she moved deeper into the house, the whispers grew louder, more urgent, layering over themselves in a chorus of secrets that the house had claimed over decades. Listener, the forgotten never rest. Their whispers reach out, threading into your mind, shaping your fears, claiming your attention. Subscribe, and stay with me. The tales are long, the shadows deep, and there are more yet to come. Marla had always been drawn to the forgotten, the abandoned, the places people whispered about but never dared enter. A librarian by day, she appeared ordinary, soft-spoken, meticulous, careful. But beneath that calm exterior lay a hunger, a curiosity too strong to ignore, too dangerous to suppress. She collected stories, old newspaper clippings, forgotten diaries, anything that spoke of lives left behind. She believed there was a truth hidden in the shadows, a pattern in the whispers of the forgotten. And that belief, that obsession, had led her here. Listener, perhaps you recognize that same curiosity in yourself. That pull toward what should be left alone. That irresistible itch to look, to hear, to understand the things that the world forbids. If you are still here, if you are drawn, subscribe. Follow carefully, and descend further into the abyss. But remember, curiosity has a price. Marla's apartment was filled with relics of her obsession. Stacks of old books, brittle pages yellowed with time. Shelves of photographs of buildings long abandoned, their windows staring blankly like eyes that had witnessed too much. Every corner held reminders that she had always been fascinated with the invisible threads connecting the past to the present, the living to the forgotten. She had been warned before. Friends, colleagues, even strangers, told her that some stories were better left untold, some places better left undisturbed. But Marla could not resist. That urge to see beyond, to pierce the veil of what should remain hidden, had always been stronger than fear. And now, standing before the decaying house in the middle of the abandoned street, that obsession burned hotter than ever. The air itself seemed to whisper to her, brushing cold against her neck, curling around her thoughts. The shadows in the house seemed to lean toward her, patient, expectant. Listener, do you feel it too? That sensation of being watched, of being drawn toward something that knows your name before you speak it? That is the pull Marla feels. And it is the same pull the abyss offers to you. Subscribe, stay with me, and follow carefully, if you dare. Marla inhaled slowly and stepped forward. Her curiosity, that dangerous, insistent flame, guided her through the threshold. The floorboards groaned under her weight, the air thickened, and the first whispers of the forgotten brushed her ears. She was no longer just a curious visitor. She had stepped into a place that had been waiting for someone like her. Someone patient, someone daring, someone willing. And as the door closed behind her, the faintest brush of a shadow, like a finger tracing her shoulder, reminded her that curiosity is never without consequence. That the forgotten never truly leave. They wait, and they watch. Marla's first steps into the house were cautious, yet each movement seemed to echo unnaturally. The floorboards groaned under her weight, but somewhere deep in the house, she swore she heard them creak again, behind her. She spun around. Empty rooms. Shadows pooled thickly in corners, but nothing moved, or so she thought. Listener, have you ever felt a presence so subtle, so patient, that it threads itself into your mind before you even notice it? That is what Marla feels now. And if you feel it creeping toward you, follow carefully, subscribe, and stay with me. The forgotten watch those who dare step too close. A whisper. Faint at first, almost indistinguishable from the wind. You shouldn't be here, it brushed against her ear, and she froze. There was no one there. The house was empty, yet alive. The air itself seemed to shift, curling around her like fingers brushing her skin. Objects moved subtly. A book slid from a shelf, landing upright on the floor. A chair creaked though no one had touched it. The temperature dropped sharply, frost crawling along the edges of the window panes. The whispers grew louder, layered, echoing in corners she hadn't even entered yet. And Marla realized she wasn't imagining it. Her heartbeat accelerated. Her palms sweated. Her mind tried to reason, drafts, old pipes, settling wood, logical explanations. But every instinct screamed otherwise. The house breathed, and it was watching her. Waiting. Testing her. Listener, do you feel it in the quiet of your own room, the corners that seem too dark, the whisper that you think is imagination? That is the first sign. And it is only the beginning. Subscribe, if you dare, and follow the path deeper into the forgotten. Marla stepped into the living room, where the furniture was coated in dust and decay. A mirror hung crookedly on the wall. She approached, and her reflection wasn't quite right. For a fraction of a second, her eyes seemed hollow, darker than they should be. She recoiled, but when she looked again, normal. Or at least, normal enough to fool her mind. And then, she heard the whispers again, this time forming words she could understand. Do not leave, do not look away, follow. Her curiosity burned brighter than fear. She couldn't leave. She had to know what waited inside this house, this place where the forgotten lingered. The first sign had revealed itself fully. The house was alive. The whispers were real. And the forgotten, they were patient. They had chosen her, and now, they would teach her fear in ways she could never unlearn. The whispers had grown into a murmur, wrapping around Marla's mind like a cold, invisible hand. The house seemed to breathe with her, each heartbeat echoing in the walls, each creak of the floorboards a warning. She could no longer tell if the shadows were still, or if they were moving just beyond her perception. Listener, if you are alone, if the darkness is closing in around you, feel it. That sense that you are being watched, that the air itself conspires against you. That is what Marla feels now. And if you want to survive the next stories, subscribe, stay with me, and follow carefully. The forgotten are patient, but they never forget. Marla stepped into a room she hadn't noticed before, a library, forgotten, coated in dust. Shelves leaned dangerously, books spilling onto the floor as if unsettled by invisible fingers. And then she saw it. A figure. Just a silhouette at first, hunched and shadowed, moving slowly between the stacks. Limbs bent at unnatural angles. It didn't move like a human. It moved like darkness itself had taken form. Its presence pressed on her mind, curling her thoughts into fear. She could feel it studying her, learning her, understanding every ounce of curiosity and dread she carried. The temperature dropped further. Her breath became visible in the icy air, trembling clouds escaping with every gulp. Whispers wrapped around her ears, overlapping, echoing, forming words she could understand. Curiosity always comes at a price. Follow, stay. Listener, do you hear it too? That faint murmur in the corner of your room? That shadow that seems just beyond sight? That is the same force Marla faces. If you wish to see what comes next, subscribe. Step deeper into the forgotten, if you dare. Marla's eyes darted from shadow to shadow. The figure didn't speak. It didn't need to. Its very presence was a warning. Every instinct screamed to run, to flee, to escape the suffocating pressure that seemed to radiate from it. But her obsession was stronger than fear. She had to see, she had to know. The figure advanced, slow, deliberate, like a predator testing its prey. The air thickened, whispers crescendoed, and Marla's mind teetered on the edge between curiosity and madness. Objects moved around her, a book fell to the floor, a chair tipped over, the faintest scratching echoing from the walls themselves. And all the while, the figure watched, patient, eternal, unyielding. Her heart pounded. She could feel it through her chest, through her head, through every fiber of her being. And then, the figure stretched upward, taller than the room, limbs bending in impossible ways, face obscured in shadow, yet somehow, she felt its gaze on her very soul. Listener, the encounter has begun. The forgotten do not forgive. They do not explain. They do not wait. And if you remain, if you continue, subscribe, and follow me further. The shadows have only just begun to teach fear. The encounter had passed, or so Marla thought. The figure had vanished, slipping into the shadows as if it had never been there. But the house had not released her. Listener, the forgotten never truly leave. They wait, patient, just beyond sight, just beyond hearing. And if you are still listening, subscribe, and follow me, for what lies beyond the walls of the known is far darker than you imagine. Marla stumbled backward, trembling, trying to rationalize what she had seen. The room appeared empty, the air calm, but the silence was wrong. Too thick. Too patient. Every creak, every draft, every flicker of shadow reminded her that the house was alive in ways no human mind could comprehend. Her reflection in a cracked mirror was not her own. The hollow eyes stared back at her, the faintest smile curling in a face she did not recognize. She pressed her hands to the glass, and for a moment, it felt as though the figure behind her leaned closer, whispering her fears, her secrets, her sins. The whispers never fully stopped. They lingered in the corners, in the cracks of the walls, in the quiet moments before sleep. Marla tried to leave, tried to escape, but she realized she had carried the house with her. The shadows followed her, brushing against her thoughts, curling around her memories. Curiosity had claimed her, and now she belonged to the forgotten as much as they belonged to her. Listener, do you feel it too? That sense of being watched when no one is there? That faint whisper brushing your ear when the room is still? That is the lingering fear. And the forgotten, they are patient. They remember you. They wait for those who are brave enough to seek them. Subscribe, if you dare, and descend further. There are more whispers yet to hear, more shadows yet to follow. Marla's life would never be the same. Every night, she felt the presence return, faint, patient, knowing. Every shadow, every draft, every unexplained sound, it was a reminder. She had survived the encounter, yes, but she had not escaped. She had become a part of the house, a part of the whispers, a part of the forgotten. And in the quietest moments, when she thought she was alone, she heard it, a whisper brushing her ear, soft but undeniable, saying, "This is only the beginning." The forgotten wait, patient, eternal, and Marla, like the whispers themselves, would never leave. Listener, the abyss is patient. The shadows are patient. And if you continue with me, you too will feel their touch. Subscribe, stay with me, and descend further into the forgotten. The night had grown heavier, darker, more silent than any night before. And yet, there was a sound. Listener, if you are still here, if your curiosity has carried you past the first two tales, then beware. The third story begins now. And it calls to you, soft, hollow, patient. Subscribe, if you dare, and step closer. For the hollow waits, and it listens to those who hear its voice. Alex had always considered himself practical, a skeptic, someone who believed in the world of the real, the tangible. But that night, walking along the desolate road that led to the abandoned chapel on the edge of the forest, he could no longer ignore the sounds. Faint echoes, hollow calls, voices that seemed to come from nowhere and everywhere at once. The fog hung low, curling like fingers across the road, obscuring the trees, the ground, even the moonlight. The hollow called again, this time, a name, clear, impossibly precise, Alex. He froze, heart hammering. There was no one there. The trees swayed in the wind, but the wind had died down. No animal stirred. And yet, the sound persisted, weaving through the fog like an invisible hand wrapping around his chest. Listener, do you hear it? That faint call at the edge of your hearing, that whisper when no one is there? That is the hollow. And it has chosen Alex, as it may have chosen you. Subscribe, stay with me, descend carefully into its domain, if you dare. The chapel loomed ahead, its steeple cracked, windows dark and empty like hollow eyes. Each step Alex took brought the calls closer, overlapping, merging into a chorus of hollow voices, repeating his name, twisting it into something alien, something demanding. He hesitated, then forced himself forward. Curiosity, that dangerous flame, burned brighter than fear. The hollow was patient. It did not need to rush. It did not need to strike. It only needed to call, and those who hear cannot resist. Listener, beware. The hollow knows the names of those who listen. The hollow knows the thoughts you try to hide. And the hollow waits, patiently, endlessly, eternally. Subscribe, if you dare, and follow carefully, for the story has only just begun. Alex had always considered himself a man of reason, someone who looked for patterns in chaos and logic in fear. He worked as a sound engineer by day, capturing noises, voices, and echoes for a living. Yet, that very obsession with sound, with what is heard and unseen, had brought him here, on the edge of the forest, to a chapel abandoned for decades, to a place no one dared enter after sunset. Listener, perhaps you recognize that same spark of curiosity in yourself. That urge to listen, to follow, to uncover the secrets that the world tries to hide. If you feel it, subscribe. Stay with me. Follow carefully, if you dare. For curiosity in this place has a cost, and the hollow remembers every name it calls. Alex had a history with the unexplained. Strange sounds in the dead of night, whispers that seemed to echo from nowhere, voices repeating his name when no one was near. He had always tried to rationalize it, electrical interference, tinnitus, the mind playing tricks. But deep down, he knew there was something else. Something patient. Something waiting. That night, as he approached the chapel, the air shifted. The fog curled around him, thicker than natural, moving as if alive. The hollow called again, faint but insistent, weaving through the mist. Alex, his heart thudded, but it was not fear that drove him forward. It was the same force that had drawn him to mysteries all his life, curiosity. The abandoned chapel was more than just wood and stone. Its silence was heavy, almost sentient, pressing against Alex's ears, making every small sound echo unnaturally. Each step forward brought the hollow closer, though it remained unseen. And he knew, instinctively, once it begins to call, you cannot ignore it. Listener, do you feel that tug in the back of your mind, the subtle pull toward something forbidden? That is the hollow reaching for you, just as it reaches for Alex. If you want to uncover what lies ahead, subscribe, follow me into the darkness. But know this, some voices do not stop calling. Some shadows never let go. Alex paused at the chapel's threshold, hand hovering over the splintered wood of the door. He had heard stories of the hollow before, whispers from old texts, rumors of disappearances, forgotten names. And now, it was calling him directly. He could feel its presence in the fog, in the echoes, in the silence between heartbeats. And yet, despite every instinct screaming to run, Alex stepped forward. Curiosity had claimed him. And in the hollow's patient, silent way, he had already been chosen. The chapel was silent, or at least, that was what Alex thought. Every step he took echoed unnaturally, bouncing off walls that seemed to stretch beyond their limits. The fog outside had thickened, curling through the broken windows, drifting into the pews like living fingers. Listener, if you are still listening, feel it. That subtle tug at the edge of your hearing, that faint echo of a voice when no one is near, that is the first sign. The hollow begins quietly, patiently, threading its presence into your mind before you even notice. Subscribe, follow carefully, if you dare. Alex paused as a distant whisper slipped through the chapel, faint but unmistakable. Alex, not a shout, not a call, just a soft, hollow repetition of his name. It came from everywhere and nowhere at once. Goosebumps rose on his arms, but his curiosity burned brighter than fear. Then the first tangible signs appeared. A candle, untouched for decades, flickered to life, casting shadows that moved independently of the flame. The air shifted, carrying a chill that made his breath visible in short, ragged clouds. And he heard it, soft scraping, faint footsteps echoing in corners where no floorboards existed. Listener, have you felt the world bend around you, reality twisting where it should remain steady? That is what Alex feels now. Every sense questioned his own mind. Every shadow seemed alive, reaching for him, whispering secrets meant for no one. Subscribe, if you wish to hear more, follow carefully, and do not turn away. The hollow's presence pressed against him, subtle but undeniable. Objects moved slightly, a chair tipped, a book fell from a shelf, pages fluttered though no wind stirred. And the whispers layered themselves, forming a chorus. Do not leave, do not turn back, come closer. Alex felt his heartbeat accelerate. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet every step forward was compelled by a dangerous curiosity. He realized that the hollow did not need to reveal itself fully. Its power was in suggestion, in sound, in the invisible pressure of being observed, of being called. The fog within the chapel thickened. The shadows elongated unnaturally. The whispers became clearer, repeating not only his name but fragments of thoughts he had tried to hide. It was then that Alex understood, he was no longer alone. The hollow had noticed him, chosen him, and the first sign was only the beginning of a descent into something beyond comprehension. Listener, the first sign is always subtle, but it is never forgiving. Some forces are patient, and some voices never stop calling. Subscribe, stay with me, and step carefully, for the hollow is already watching. The whispers had grown louder now, no longer subtle murmurs but a chorus of hollow voices, layering over one another, pressing against Alex's mind. The air inside the chapel seemed heavier, almost viscous, curling around him like fingers reaching into his chest. Listener, if you are alone, if the darkness presses in around you, feel it. That suffocating presence, the sensation that you are being called, watched, chosen, that is what Alex feels now. And if you wish to survive the hollow, subscribe, follow carefully, if you dare. The shadows moved. Not naturally, not according to any logic of light and space. They twisted, stretched, and curled toward him. And then he saw it, a figure, neither fully human nor entirely darkness, emerging from the thickest shadow. Limbs bent at impossible angles. Its form shimmered like smoke, yet it was solid enough to press against the air, against his very mind. Alex froze, heart hammering, every instinct screaming to run. The hollow did not speak, yet its presence communicated in ways beyond words. Thoughts not his own whispered in his mind, memories he had never shared with anyone flashing across his vision. Fear, confusion, fascination, all collided, and he realized, this was not a creature to confront. This was a force, patient, eternal, and infinitely aware. Listener, do you feel it in the quiet? That tug at your mind, the whisper of a name, the shadow that seems too long, too dark, that is the hollow calling. Subscribe, stay with me, and do not look away. For those who answer, the hollow never forgets. Alex tried to move, but the floor seemed to resist him. Every step forward was a struggle, as though the chapel itself had grown alive, twisting space, bending reality around the entity. The hollow's form loomed larger, its head tilting in a way that should not have been possible. And then it reached toward him, not with hands, but with intent, with awareness, with a pressure that crushed the mind as much as the body. His chest tightened. Every breath was a fight. And yet, Alex stood, curiosity and terror intertwined, unable to retreat. The hollow circled him, a predator playing with prey, patient, silent, eternal. And then, it paused, mere inches away, its presence pressing into him like a living nightmare. Listener, this is the encounter. The moment when the unknown becomes undeniable. When the voice you hear in the dark, the shadow you sense in the corner, is no longer imagination. Subscribe, follow me carefully, and brace yourself. The hollow has only just begun to teach fear. Alex's vision blurred. The whispers overlapped, merging with his own heartbeat. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet his body remained frozen. The entity leaned closer, silent, patient, observing, testing, learning. And Alex understood with a dread that made his blood run cold. The encounter was not about violence. It was about claiming attention, claiming curiosity, claiming the soul of those who dared listen. And as the hollow receded, blending back into the shadows from which it came, Alex knew with certainty. He had survived, but he had not escaped. He had been marked. The call of the hollow would follow him, patient, persistent, eternal. The encounter had ended, or at least, that was what Alex told himself. The hollow had retreated into the shadows, fading into the darkness of the chapel, leaving only silence. But the silence was heavy, suffocating, filled with a presence he could feel pressing against his mind. Listener, the hollow never truly leaves. It waits, patient, stretching its influence across time and space. And if you are listening now, it may already be calling your name. Subscribe, follow me, if you dare, for those who hear its voice cannot unhear it. Alex stumbled out of the chapel into the fog-laden night, but the hollow had already left its mark. Every whisper of the wind, every shadow in the corner of his vision, every faint echo of sound in the distance carried its presence. He could feel it observing him, threading itself into his thoughts, shaping his fears, watching patiently for the next moment he might stray too far from safety. His apartment offered no refuge. The faintest sounds, the creak of a floorboard, the rustle of a curtain, the hum of electronics, were transformed into the hollow's whispers. Even in daylight, the memory of its hollow calls lingered. His mind became a constant battlefield between rational thought and the persistent, patient pull of the unseen. Listener, do you feel it? That tug at the edge of your mind, the feeling of being observed when no one is there, the whisper in the silence? That is the hollow. And it is patient. Eternal. Waiting. Subscribe, stay with me, descend carefully, if you dare. Alex knew one truth above all: surviving the encounter did not mean escaping it. He had been chosen, marked, haunted. The hollow would follow him wherever he went, patient, persistent, eternal. Each night, he would hear its hollow calls, shaping his dreams, invading his thoughts, reminding him of the fragile boundary between curiosity and obsession. And in the quietest moments, when he thought he was alone, he would hear it again: "You cannot hide, we remember, we wait." Listener, the hollow is patient. Its reach is endless. And those who hear its voice are never truly free. Subscribe, stay with me, and descend further into the abyss, for the next story awaits, darker, longer, and more patient than you can imagine. The next tale begins, and it watches. Listener, if you have followed me through the shadows, the whispers, and the hollow, then beware. For this story looks back at you, through glass, through reflection, through the things you thought were empty. Subscribe, if you dare, and witness the fourth descent into the abyss. Clara had always been drawn to mirrors. Not the ordinary ones in hallways or bathrooms, but old, ornate, forgotten mirrors, framed in gold or blackened wood, standing silently in abandoned houses or shuttered mansions. There was something about them, something patient, something that seemed to watch back. She found it in the house at the edge of town, a mansion abandoned for decades, its windows boarded, its halls silent. Dust swirled in the weak sunlight that filtered through cracks, and at the end of the hallway, the mirror stood. Tall, imposing, and impossibly black, as though it swallowed light rather than reflected it. Listener, do you feel it? That pull toward something forbidden, that urge to look closer, even when your mind screams to run? That is what Clara feels. And if you are drawn as she is, subscribe. Stay with me, and descend carefully into the forgotten. She stepped closer. Her reflection shimmered oddly, delayed slightly, as if it moved just after she did. She frowned, leaning closer. And then, for a fraction of a second, her reflection smiled. Not her smile, a twisted, patient, knowing smile that lingered longer than it should have, frozen in the blackened glass. A chill crawled up her spine. The air in the hallway thickened, pressing against her chest. The mirror seemed alive, breathing slowly, pulsing subtly, as though it held its own heart. Clara's instinct screamed at her to step back. But curiosity, that dangerous flame, burned hotter than fear. Listener, the mirror watches those who look too long. It remembers those who linger. And Clara is about to discover the cost of her obsession. Subscribe, if you dare, and witness what stares back when the reflection moves independently, when the forgotten souls reach for the curious, and when the glass is no longer just glass. The mansion was silent except for the faintest creak of wood. And the mirror watched, patient, eternal, waiting for Clara to step fully into its gaze. And as she did, the first flicker of something beyond the glass moved, just for her. Clara had always been fascinated by what others ignored, by the hidden corners of the world that whispered secrets. A researcher of forgotten histories by day, a seeker of anomalies by night, she had a fascination with mirrors, antique mirrors, mirrors abandoned in old houses, mirrors that had watched generations pass away. Listener, perhaps you feel that same curiosity, that pull toward the unknown, toward the things that should remain unseen. If so, subscribe. Stay with me, and follow carefully into the abyss, for the mirror waits, patient, eternal, and it remembers those who linger. Clara's obsession began years ago, after a childhood incident she never spoke of. A reflection that lingered too long, a shadow in the glass that wasn't hers, a fleeting figure that disappeared before anyone else could see it. Most people had dismissed it as imagination. But for Clara, it was a spark, a promise that the unseen world held more than ordinary eyes could perceive. Now, standing before the mansion's mirror, that spark had grown into a blaze. She was meticulous, careful, yet driven by an insatiable need to know what lay beyond the surface. Her friends had warned her, strangers had whispered their doubts, but she had ignored them all. Curiosity, she knew, was dangerous, but irresistible. The mirror reflected her form perfectly at first, or so it seemed. Then, for the briefest instant, the reflection hesitated. A shadow passed behind her in the glass, though no one was there. She blinked, and it was gone. Yet the unease lingered, curling through her thoughts, pressing against the corners of her mind. Listener, do you feel it? That sensation of being watched, of the reflection not matching what you see? That is the first step. And Clara is about to take it, whether she wants to or not. Subscribe, if you dare, and descend further, for the mirror of forgotten souls does not forgive curiosity, and it remembers every name it calls. Her hands hovered near the cold glass, tracing the frame lightly. Every instinct told her to stop, to retreat, but the same obsession that had haunted her childhood pushed her forward. She could feel the air change around her, heavier now, almost sentient. The mansion itself seemed to lean closer, guiding her gaze, urging her to look deeper, to step closer, to see beyond the reflection, into the place where forgotten souls linger. The mansion seemed still, but Clara knew better. The air was heavier now, almost alive, pressing against her chest as she studied the mirror. At first, the reflection appeared normal, her face, pale in the candlelight, eyes wide with curiosity, but then, something shifted. Listener, have you ever looked into a mirror and felt it look back differently? Not just your eyes, not just your expression, but something beneath, something alive, watching, patient? That is the first sign. And if you dare to continue, subscribe. Stay with me. The mirror is watching. Clara stepped closer, and her reflection hesitated before mirroring her movements. A shadow seemed to flicker behind her in the glass. She spun, heart hammering, but the hallway was empty. When she looked back, the shadow was there again, closer, moving independently of her, as if it existed on a plane just beyond her perception. A whisper slithered through the room, soft, almost indistinguishable from the wind, but unmistakable. Closer, look deeper, see us. Her hands shook as she reached toward the glass. The reflection blinked, and for a fraction of a second, her face smiled differently. It was not her smile. It was patient, knowing, mocking. Her pulse quickened. Objects in the room began to move subtly. A candlestick tilted. Dust lifted into the air as if stirred by unseen fingers. The temperature dropped, her breath visible in short clouds. And yet, the mirror, it drew her in. Its surface shimmered like a dark portal, reflecting not just her form, but shapes she could not recognize, faint faces, blurred figures, the hollow outlines of forgotten souls. Listener, do you feel it too? That faint pull at the edge of your mind, that brush of presence when you are alone? That is the mirror calling. And Clara is about to discover that some reflections do not belong to the living. Subscribe, follow carefully, and do not look away, for the mirror remembers every name, every movement, every curiosity it captures. Clara's reflection tilted its head in a way she did not. Its eyes, hollow, patient, and knowing, met hers. And she realized with a growing dread that this was no longer subtle, no longer harmless. The mirror had noticed her. It had chosen her. The first sign was clear. The supernatural was no longer just an idea. It was tangible, patient, and reaching. And for Clara, there was no turning back. The air in the mansion thickened, curling around Clara like invisible fingers as she stared into the mirror. The reflection no longer mirrored her movements perfectly. It moved with subtle delays, its head tilting in ways her own could not. And then, it smiled. Listener, if you are listening alone, beware. That pull you feel when curiosity calls, that is what Clara feels now. And if you dare to witness what happens next, subscribe. Follow carefully, for the mirror does not forgive hesitation. Suddenly, the reflection's eyes darkened, hollow and patient. Shapes emerged behind it, faint silhouettes of forgotten souls, blurred and twisted, trapped between glass and reality. Their whispers filled the room, overlapping, repeating Clara's name. Clara, closer, we see you, we remember. The candlelight flickered violently, casting elongated shadows across the floor. Objects moved on their own, a chair tipped, books slid across the table, dust spiraled unnaturally in the air. The reflection stepped forward. No, it stepped out of the glass, bending reality itself, its form solid yet impossible, like smoke twisted into human shape. Clara's heart pounded. She tried to retreat, but the floor felt wrong, distorted. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the mirror had claimed her attention, anchoring her in place. The entity's hollow gaze penetrated her mind, revealing memories, fears, and secrets she had never spoken. Listener, the encounter is not always physical. Sometimes, it is psychological, eternal. Sometimes, it is your very soul under inspection. Subscribe, if you dare, follow closely, and do not blink. The figure leaned closer, and Clara felt a pressure in her chest, as though the room itself sought to compress her being into the glass. Her reflection reached out, impossibly extending its hand toward hers. The air seemed to resist, vibrating with an unnatural hum that rattled her bones. Whispers filled her ears, promises and warnings intertwined. We have waited, we remember, we claim, she gasped, stumbling backward, but the mirror's surface rippled like liquid, swallowing shadows and light alike. Clara realized with bone-deep terror that the encounter was not about violence. It was about claiming attention, claiming obsession, claiming the curious for eternity. And in that moment, she understood, surviving the mirror's gaze did not mean escaping it. Listener, this is the moment the mirror strikes. When curiosity becomes obsession, when the reflection moves independently, when the forgotten souls watch and wait. Subscribe, stay with me, descend carefully, if you dare. The mirror has only begun to teach fear. The mirror had receded, or so Clara believed. She stumbled back, heart racing, lungs burning, and yet the air felt heavier than ever. The mansion seemed to sigh, stretching shadows across the floor, pressing its silence into her mind. Listener, the mirror never truly lets go. It waits, patient, eternal. And if you are listening now, it may already be watching you. Subscribe, stay with me, if you dare, for the forgotten souls remember those who look too long. Clara left the mansion, but the mirror followed her, not in sight, not in reflection, but in the pull of her thoughts. Every mirror she passed showed fleeting glimpses of movement behind her. Every reflective surface carried shadows that weren't hers. Even in daylight, the faintest shimmer of glass tugged at her mind, whispering her name. Objects moved subtly, inexplicably. A cup tipped, a door creaked, dust stirred, all unseen. The mirror had left a mark, a connection that could not be broken. Its presence was patient, persistent, and eternal. Clara had survived the encounter, yes, but she had not escaped. Listener, do you feel it? That tug at the edge of your awareness, that whisper in the glass when no one is near? That is the mirror calling, reaching, remembering. Subscribe, stay with me, and descend further into the abyss, for the final story awaits. Her dreams were invaded. Faces appeared in reflections where none should exist. Shadows lingered at the edges of her vision, moving independently of light. The whispers of the forgotten souls, the ones trapped in the mirror, filled her mind at night, patient, insistent, unrelenting. And in the quietest moments, when she thought she was alone, she heard it clearly: "We are still here, we remember, and we wait." Listener, the mirror watches. The mirror remembers. And those who dare to follow the curiosity of the unknown are never truly free. Subscribe, stay with me, and prepare for the last descent, the fifth story, darker and more patient than any before. Clara had survived the mirror, but the mirror had survived her. And the abyss waits for the next willing soul. The final descent begins, and the abyss watches. Listener, if you have followed the whispers, the hollow, the mirrors, and the forgotten souls, then beware. You are no longer just a witness. You are being observed. Subscribe, if you dare, and step closer into the darkness, where the abyss waits for the curious, the brave, and the foolish alike. Elias had tracked stories for years. Stories of vanishings, of whispers in the night, of shadows that moved independently. Tales of the hollow that called names, mirrors that trapped souls, and forgotten voices lingering just beyond perception. He believed he could observe without consequence, that knowledge alone would shield him. But as he crossed the threshold into the old cathedral at the edge of the forest, he felt it immediately, a presence so vast, so patient, that it seemed to stretch beyond the building, beyond the trees, beyond the world itself. The darkness was thick, alive, pressing against his chest, curling around his mind. Listener, feel it. That subtle pressure at the edge of your thoughts, the sensation that something watches when you are alone, that is the abyss. And it is patient, eternal. And it has always been waiting for you. Subscribe, follow me, if you dare. The cathedral's halls were silent, or at least, they should have been. Every step echoed unnaturally, bouncing off walls that seemed impossibly tall, impossibly endless. Whispers overlapped, voices from the hollow, from the mirrors, from forgotten souls, forming a chorus that scraped against Elias's mind. And then he felt it, a gaze. Not a single pair of eyes, but thousands, countless, watching, calculating, patient. He realized with a shiver that the abyss knew his name, knew his fears, knew the curiosity that had driven him here. Listener, this is the hook. The moment the unknown becomes undeniable. The abyss watches all who dare listen, all who dare look, all who dare exist in the space between stories. Subscribe, if you dare, stay with me, for the abyss is patient, and it never forgets. Elias had always sought the unknown. A chronicler of forbidden tales, he spent his life tracking stories that most would dismiss as madness, the hollow that called names, the mirrors that trapped souls, the whispers of those long forgotten. He believed he could observe the horrors without succumbing to them, that curiosity alone would keep him safe. Listener, perhaps you feel that same dangerous curiosity, the itch to peer where darkness hides, the pull toward the forbidden. If so, subscribe. Follow me carefully into the abyss, for only the brave, or the foolish, dare to look deeper. Elias was not fearless. He had survived encounters that would have broken most. Yet the abyss was different. It was patient, eternal, and aware. Every story he had chronicled, every entity he had witnessed, it all led to this moment. To the cathedral at the edge of the forest, where shadows stretched beyond comprehension, where silence was louder than screams. He carried the weight of knowledge, but it offered no comfort. Each step forward pressed against his chest, and he could feel eyes, thousands of them, countless and unseen, tracking him. The abyss remembered everything, every name, every fear, every act of curiosity that had led a soul too close. Listener, the protagonist is you, as much as him. The abyss watches all who listen, all who follow, all who dare. Subscribe, stay with me, descend carefully, if you dare, and witness what it means to be chosen. Elias paused at the cathedral's threshold, his hand hovering over the heavy, rusted doors. The air inside shimmered with unnatural cold. He knew, deep down, that stepping inside meant crossing a boundary from which there was no return. And yet, as always, curiosity burned brighter than fear. Inside, the shadows seemed to pulse with life, stretching, whispering, waiting. The abyss was aware. It was patient. And now, it had seen Elias. The cathedral stretched into shadows that seemed endless, walls bending in ways that logic could not follow. Every step Elias took echoed unnaturally, carrying whispers that overlapped into a cacophony of voices, some familiar, some utterly alien. Listener, do you hear it? The faint pressure at the edge of your mind, the whisper that seems almost nothing, that is the abyss beginning to reach. And if you dare to see what comes next, subscribe. Follow carefully, for the abyss is patient, and it watches all who listen. It began subtly at first. Candles flickered though no draft existed. The temperature dropped sharply, and his breath rose in small clouds. Shadows stretched longer, moving independently, not bound by walls or light. And then he felt it, an awareness pressing against his mind, as if the cathedral itself were alive, as if countless eyes from every corner of the darkness were tracking his every thought. The whispers grew louder, overlapping, fragments from previous horrors, voices of the hollow, the forgotten souls, reflections from mirrors long abandoned. We remember, we see, we wait. Elias staggered, his hands gripping a pew for support. The floor beneath him seemed to ripple, bending reality as if the world itself were folding into the abyss. Every instinct screamed to flee, yet his curiosity anchored him. He knew the abyss was aware, patient, and it had begun to draw him in. Listener, can you feel it too? The pull toward what you should fear? The sense that the darkness watches, judges, remembers? That is the first sign. The abyss does not strike immediately, it waits, it observes, it claims attention, and it marks the curious. Subscribe, stay with me, and do not look away. Shadows converged. Light warped unnaturally. Shapes emerged from the darkness, distorted figures, hollow and patient, moving closer without sound. Elias realized with bone-deep dread that the abyss was no longer just a story, no longer distant. It was present, aware, patient, and it had chosen him. The abyss had been patient, but now it struck. Listener, if you are alone, if darkness presses in around you, feel it. That pressure at the edge of your thoughts, the sensation that you are being watched, judged, remembered, that is what Elias feels now. And if you dare to continue, subscribe. Follow carefully, for the abyss knows you are listening. Shadows in the cathedral writhed unnaturally, twisting into shapes that defied comprehension. Light bent and fractured, reflecting impossible angles, and whispers layered on whispers, overlapping the calls of the hollow, the mirrors, the forgotten souls, all converging on him. Elias tried to move, but the floor rippled beneath his feet, bending reality itself. Every step was a struggle, every breath carried the weight of unseen eyes pressing against his mind. The abyss manifested fully now, not as a single entity, but as countless presences, all patient, all aware, all reaching. He saw them, distorted figures emerging from darkness, hollow shapes that flickered between corporeal and spectral. They twisted around him, brushing against his senses, probing his thoughts, dragging memories from the deepest corners of his mind. Fear, curiosity, obsession, they fed the abyss, and it pulsed with power. Listener, do you feel it? The pull toward what you should never witness, the awareness that something beyond comprehension watches every thought? That is the encounter. And the abyss waits for all who dare to see. Subscribe, if you dare, and follow me, for it has only begun to teach fear. The whispers merged into a voice, singular yet infinitely layered. We have seen you. We remember you. You belong to us now. The cathedral groaned as shadows stretched to infinity. Elias's mind reeled, every memory, every secret, every fear exposed. The abyss did not strike with claws or teeth, it struck with awareness, with inevitability, with the undeniable truth that he was not alone, and never would be. He stumbled backward, heart hammering, gasping for air, but the darkness held him in place. Every instinct screamed to flee, but the abyss had claimed his attention, his curiosity, his very soul. It was patient, eternal, and aware of every movement, every thought. Listener, the encounter is complete when you realize that there is no escape. That curiosity itself is the leash. Subscribe, stay with me, and witness the abyss fully, for it is eternal, patient, and it watches you even now. Elias's vision blurred as the shadows closed in. The whispers became deafening, overlapping every sense. And in that final, paralyzing instant, he understood with bone-deep certainty. The abyss had chosen him, marked him, and nothing, not courage, not knowledge, not will, could sever the connection. The encounter had ended, or perhaps, it had only begun. The encounter had ended, or so Elias thought. Listener, the abyss never truly releases those who have witnessed it. It waits, patient, eternal, stretching beyond walls, shadows, and time itself. And if you are listening now, it may already know you. Subscribe, if you dare, and descend carefully, for the abyss remembers every name, every curiosity, every fearful heartbeat. Elias stumbled from the cathedral, but the darkness followed. Shadows twisted in every corner of his vision, Reflections moved when no mirror existed, and whispers of every entity, the hollow, the mirror, the forgotten souls, overlapped in a relentless chorus in his mind. The abyss had marked him, and it would not let go. Every step outside was haunted. Every street lamp cast shadows that seemed to reach for him. Every night, in dreams, he saw the cathedral's halls stretch into infinity, populated by the twisted, patient shapes of the abyss. It was aware of him, of his thoughts, of his fears, and it had learned that he could not turn away. Listener, do you feel it too? The pull at the edge of your mind, the sense that unseen eyes are watching, judging, waiting? That is the abyss. And it is patient. Eternal. It watches all who have dared to listen, and now, it watches you. Subscribe, stay with me, and do not look away, for the abyss remembers everything. Elias's life became a constant battle with shadows. He could not escape the whispers, the flickers at the edge of his vision, the sensation of being observed at every turn. Even in daylight, the faintest reflection, the smallest movement of air, reminded him, the abyss had chosen him, and it was eternal. And in the quietest moments, when he thought he was alone, he heard it clearly, we have seen you. We remember you. You belong to us now. Listener, the abyss watches. It has watched the hollow, the mirrors, the forgotten souls, and now it has watched you. And those who have descended fully into the abyss, are never truly free. Subscribe, stay with me, and remember, the darkness is patient, and it waits for all who dare to look too closely. Elias had survived the final encounter, but the abyss had survived him. And the abyss watches still.